name is Pini. I'm going to talk about cloud native transformation. Very quiet, right? Yeah. Bit of energy. Thank you. So I'm from Container Solutions. We have all these offices in all kind of places. I'm based in Amsterdam. What we do is basically helping companies to adopt cloud native. And the rest of the talk will be basically about how do we do that. We do have also office in Poland, in Warsaw actually. And every story, according to Leotel's story, is about either man goes on a journey or a stranger comes to the town. And this one will be about the stranger. Before I actually go into the story itself, let me introduce the main protagonist of the story, which is a company that is called WealthGrid. It's not a real company, obviously. Generally speaking, it's a financial company, although it could be any industry. It's not very big, not very small, sort of medium size. Pretty good and nice company, a bit traditional. But generally speaking, it's not a bad place to work at. In that company, we have the main character I'm going to talk about is Jani. She is a technical middle manager. She is responsible for engineering in WealthGrid. And I will also mention engineers and the CEO. They are sort of part of the story too. Now, again, it's a nice company, but a bit waterfallish and sort of very traditional. So, who is the stranger? There are three types of strangers so far. And the first one, it is a financial company. So who knows ING Bank? Who doesn't know ING Bank, right? Now, ING Bank is actually a Dutch bank. It's also present in Poland and all kind of other places. It's one of the biggest banks in the world. And for the last about 6 to 7 years, they are very proudly saying that they are a tech company with a banking license, right? The company is explicitly focusing on refactoring the entire banking into actually technology. So from their perspective, technology first, banking second. Now they're doing it for 6 years or 7 years. Maybe they didn't finish the transformation, but clearly they can deliver value to customers much faster. So this is a traditional competitor. This is a bank, right? It's present in the market for decades, and they potentially can come and disrupt themselves. The second one is actual disruptor. So this is Starling Bank, is a new bank in UK. It exists for about 4 years now, I guess. And Starling Bank is one of 20-something banks in Europe only, that they are mobile only. And they are explicitly very proud that they have built an entire bank, functional bank, within a year. So actually, since they got the license until they had the first customer, it was 1 year. So they could actually build fully functional software-based bank in a year. And the third one is somebody like Amazon. Now, Amazon is obviously a tech giant. It has all kind of different types of businesses. We mostly know it from retailer and cloud business, but recently they bought chain of supermarkets. And apparently, they have a banking license. Right? It's not a common knowledge, but they do have a banking license. No one knows what they're going to do with it, but they may, for example, tomorrow announce that they're doing banking. There's an estimation that if they do that, they can get 70 million banking customers in US alone within a short period of time. So the other thing is that they're not just coming, okay, so fine. they're doing their thing, we're doing our thing. One day they will come and we will deal with them. The thing is that if today the company is going sort of, the normal company like WealthGrid is going sort of up, sort of consistently linearly up, those disruptor banks, they are building up their capabilities. And we expect that the growth will be exponential. Once they get the market, they will just get all of it. So look at the examples of Uber and Airbnb. And it's not technology companies. They are technology companies, but they are not operating in software space or technology space. They're operating in totally physical, normal space of hotels and taxis. And although in the beginning they were small, once they become viable business, they entirely won the entire market, right? Entire world. We cannot even imagine today the world without Airbnb. So, and why those companies, those disrupting companies, why they can go so fast? So generally the idea is that they can do this cycle of build something, release to the customer, measure the results, improve, build, measure, and continue doing this. They can do it very quickly, extremely quickly. So if traditional company can release every year or every 6 months, they can release every day. And the reason for that is specific cloud-native technologies. It doesn't matter how we call them, but it's pretty obvious that Airbnb and Google and Uber and Amazon, they are all winning their markets mainly due to technology. So we are here in Cloud Native conference. So obviously we are claiming that Cloud Native is that change that brought this kind of change in speed and delivery. Now, it is also important to understand that although, especially in the financial industry, it may look like those new contender banks like Starling and all kind of other companies, they are not yet taking major stake in the market. They may be still tiny. Maybe in your own niche, you sort of know that there is one of those Starling banks, but they are still so small that maybe they're taking few tens of thousands of customers. Maybe they take, I don't know, maybe less than 1% of the market. So it's not really important. That's fine. That's fine. There is no significant competition. There is no significant damage to the revenue and to your own business. The problem is that your company, traditional WealthGrid style company, is running on certain margin of revenue. And if you lose 1% of your revenue, what's going to happen is typically that the R&D is going to go down first, right? It means that you will invest less. As you start losing your market share, you're going to invest less into R&D, into actual development. And you have all kind of things that you need to pay salaries, you have big offices, you have all kind of different things that you still need to feed. What happens with the companies like Starling Bank, they have none of that. Every tiny bit of the new revenue they get, 100% goes in the development and immediately becomes new value to the customer. And what happens after that, that once they show just tiny portion of traction, just a bit of traction, just 100 other customers, they immediately get unlimited funding. So essentially, once they have any sort of traction in your market, they will get 50 million funding. They will hire 100 new engineers, 200 new engineers. And at that point, it will be very, very difficult to keep up with their growth. So let's get back to Jani. So at that point, she's a middle manager. She's sort of in between engineering and the business, and she realizes that she has to do something. And the first thing typically a company like WealthGrid would do is to say just, it's not even intentional. Let's do Kubernetes, right? Let's do something. microservices, let's go to the cloud. There are many names for that. Essentially what happens, there are a couple of engineers, they just start hacking around Kubernetes, right? Installing it somewhere, putting things in containers, fine. So at that point, Jani says, fine, let's do that. Let's put all those tasks. Let's put Kubernetes as a Scrum in our Scrum backlog and see what happens. Probably in 3 months, we'll have fully functional, production-ready cloud-native system. Now, of course, it doesn't work like that, right? So what happens really is that, yes, 3 months pass, actually 6 or 9 months pass, and what happens is just tiny portion of the cloud-native is installed. There is some sort of 2 containers and some sort of 2-legged Kubernetes somewhere, but it's definitely not in the place where you would put your production-ready loads. Okay, and of course also there is always pressure to deliver more functionality. The business says we have to deliver more functionality, right? I mean, who haven't been in this situation when I'll go and work on some Kubernetes, on some infrastructure, on some non-functional requirement. I'll add some tests. Actually, no, that feature has to go to the customer. So what happens is the features always win. And the amount of new cloud-native technology deployed is sort of tiny, right? Okay. Of course, Jani is a smart manager. Let's do something else. Fine. Let's set up a team. Let's take about half of our engineering team, put them on the cloud-native project, create a separate backlog for cloud-native and the legacy applications. The general idea is at that point that we do have a lot of technical debt in the legacy system. It is very difficult and expensive and long to deliver functionality within the legacy environment. So we are going to build a fully functional cloud-native platform. We are going to migrate all our applications to that platform. And from that point, we can deliver value so fast that we will stop delivering the value to the customers for, let's say, 6 months. But after 6 months, we will go so fast that we will pick up speed and, deliver all those values in just 1 month. This is obviously pretty optimistic view of the world. So after 6 or more likely 12 months, you still don't really have the cloud-native platform. What you have is maybe a third of cloud-native platform. What you don't have is new features, right? So now you have non-functional cloud-native platform that is sort of not finished, and there is no even end to it being finished. And you haven't delivered proper value to the customers for the last 6 or 12 months. Okay, that becomes, although the executive team really supports this initiative because you said all these nice words, Kubernetes, cloud native, Docker, to your managers, and they all have no idea what it actually means, so they totally support you into actually doing it. But at some point, the pressure starts to build up. Okay, so why this is actually so difficult? Why these very smart engineers and teams that build a lot of very cool software, at the end they did build an entire banking company, right? Why cannot they build a simple cloud-native platform? Yeah, because it's not simple. It's actually pretty difficult. So what is cloud-native first? This is a very, very standard definition of cloud-native by CNCF. Its main points are microservices, containers, Kubernetes essentially, to build great products faster. So exactly like those new companies, what they do, this cycle of building new products faster, that's the whole purpose of cloud native. not really the scale, not really the complexity of the applications, like Facebook or Google or whatever else. This is obviously also very important. But for majority of the companies, the main goal in cloud native is to build great products faster. So, okay, in other, so again, microservices, containers, and Kubernetes. So, how this journey starts, basically. Going a bit back into the first steps of Wells Grid, how did they start with cloud native? And what happened, even before Jani actually realized that something had to be done, there was some engineer, a couple of engineers, they went to one of those conferences like this one, or even better, something like KubeCon. There's Kelsey Hightower on the stage doing magic, right? Installing containers, running Tetris on a bunch of clouds. Recently, he was doing serverless from one cloud into another. Amazing stuff, very cool. Okay, I'll do that. And actually putting something in the container is almost trivial, right? It's like 10 minutes and you're done. Fine, then let's do something more complex. I'll take a couple of my applications, some Java stuff, stick them in a container, put them in Docker Compose or some Minikube, start them up on my laptop. Still pretty simple. Same day, all done. At that point, they went to the CEO and got the permission to go full speed ahead. Unfortunately, the complexity explodes after that because there is almost no similarities between the simple application with few containers running on single laptop and between fully scalable cloud native production ready system. So what happens at that point is, of course, they realize that they have done something moment, right? And basically, another reason is that there is misunderstanding of actually what cloud native is. So as I mentioned before, the CNCF essentially sees cloud native as those three things: containers, Kubernetes, and microservices. As you may see, there is a lot of wide gaps. So obviously, there is way more stuff, right? So from our experience, it is very nice to see cloud native as a very technical infrastructure, architecture, development practices process. But in reality, it is actually a significant change in the way we build software. And it does start from the infrastructure. And it is going up to the orchestration and continuous delivery and microservices. But it also requires certain team structure and also certain way of doing things or culture in the company. Actually, if the company is not set to build cloud native, the chance of success is actually very limited. And of course, this is traditional scary slide, right? You would see it in almost every presentation about cloud native. This is another reason why cloud native is so difficult, because it's not yet fully finished cloud native, fully finished ecosystem. This is CNCF landscape of cloud native landscape. There's over 700 tools in the cloud native world, right? And essentially, when you're building a cloud native platform, you would probably need anywhere between 15 to 25 different tools, and you need to choose a bunch of them and combine them together, integrate them, and it's a pretty difficult task still. You don't really need to read those things, right? If you are interested in actually finding those tools, you can look for CNCF landscape. So back to Jani. So the situation is like this. There was, let's say, about 6 months of going around and trying to install Kubernetes in the underground somehow without talking to anyone. There was another 6 to 12 months of intentional, directed project with pretty significant team to try to actually deploy cloud native platform. And at that point, there is still very slow delivery of the value to the customers. And actually, in the last 6 months, there is hardly anything delivered to the customers because most of the engineers are moved to work on Kubernetes platform or microservices. So at that point, the CEO is pretty much like, you have to finish it. You have to finish it. If you are not done within the next 3 months, we are just canceling the entire thing. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll fire the entire development department and go to some outsourcing company. Okay. We need to do something else again. Before I finish this story, let me introduce few tools, few techniques that we are using that will help me to explain actually the solution for this situation. So the first one is difference between creativity and proficiency. So when we start a new initiative as a startup, as a new project, as imagine McDonald's in 50s when they only started. It's all about creativity. It's something that we don't know what we are doing. It's sort of everything is mystery for us. We have no idea how to actually, what kind of, if the idea is working, if it's a good idea at all. Right? With McDonald's specifically, what they invented is drive-through restaurant instead of drive-in restaurant. Until McDonald's, Americans would just go into the parking spot near the restaurant, and then they would walk to the counter and buy the hamburger. No, sorry, that's the McDonald's story. They will sit in the car, and then the waiter would actually approach the car, take the order, go back, and then bring them the hamburger. What they decided to do is actually that people actually approach the counter or actually drive with the car to the counter. Was it a good idea or not? I mean, it's pretty obviously today it was a great idea, excellent idea, right? But in 50s it wasn't that obvious. So that is the situation of mystery. At some point they had 4 restaurants, they were working, the process was very optimized. That was a heuristic. So basically they knew what they were doing. There were a few people that sort of knew how to run the restaurant, the McDonald's brothers. And then today, it's a very, very different business, right? Imagine, have seen the McDonald's movie? How it's called? The Founder, yes. It's about another guy called Kroc. Ray Kroc, yes, thank you. He was the one who essentially built the modern McDonald's. And today, it's all about proficiency. There is very little creativity in McDonald's. Very little. It's all about proficiency. There is actual book. When you open a restaurant, you have to do everything by the book. There is no left and right, just whatever they decided. So what it means is that when we start this journey, we are sort of figuring out what we are doing. Then there becomes some sort of predictable process, and at the end, it's totally algorithmic. And there are also all kind of other features of the company once it changes direction. For example, in the beginning, it's a very small group of people just working together, no hierarchy. Then there becomes some groups, smaller groups of people, and then at some point there is a very strong bureaucratic hierarchy. On the other hand, the money comes at the end, right? Once you can actually properly scale the business. So this is totally natural way of doing things. There are also all kind of different ways of running the teams for creativity and for proficiency. Right? So there are different ways to run teams. If you want to run a creative team, you give them a goal and let them be. Support them, help them to fail fast, experiment. If you're in creative team, in a proficient team, you rehearse. You do the same thing over and over again, right? If you run creative team in proficient way, no good thing will happen. Now imagine Scrum, right? Scrum in traditional implementation is basically always creating pressure on delivery. Always the backlog is bigger than what team can actually deliver. And there is no breaks between sprints. So for example, you are going for, I have seen 17 sprints of 2 weeks each, no breaks in between, and every single sprint there is too much to do. Right? Imagine you are running 17 sprints in a row. How much creativity would you have at that point? Right? Actually physically running. When people running sprints, they don't look on the sides. There's no creativity. It's actually intentional. Scrum is optimized on speed of delivery of the same thing over and over again. It almost automatically squeezes out creativity. And this is Three Horizons model from McKinsey. And they say you always need to consider both creativity and proficiency. You need to invest about 70% of your time into the things in the products you are selling now. Another 25% in the products you are going to be selling in a year from now, and another 5% in random research. So, who is this company that is investing 95% of their time into current business? How would you call that? Any guesses? Okay, this one. Okay, that's good. So back to the first one, to the blue one. If this one is startup, what is this one? Enterprise. This one? Good guess, right? That's the point. So it is a natural process that enterprises that once been startups, they forget how to innovate. And actually moving to cloud native, a lot of it is innovation. A lot of it requires creativity and random research. Okay, number two. So the first one was difference between creativity and proficiency. The tool number two is patterns. Now, these are books from Christopher Alexander from 70s. He was actually an architect, not software architect, actual normal proper architect, buildings and cities and stuff. And he wrote a series of books about patterns, or what in software we call design patterns. Very simple explanation of patterns is this. Pattern is like a word, like a term, like a table, chair, sofa, right? There is no clear definition what or how table looks like. You can have, I actually keep asking people, how table, what is the defining feature of a table? Is it 4 legs? Is it legs at all? This one doesn't have any legs, right? Does it have a straight top? How tall, short it is? No clear definition. But when we talk about table, we all know what it is, somehow. So it's sort of clear and also vague. So it's a term that we can talk about, and if needed, we can define it better with more features. So this is called the pattern. Then the language is a set of words in that specific domain, in some specific domain. So if we have a language, a furniture language, then all the furniture names would be included in the furniture language. And the last one is designers and stories. And designs are sort of sentences you can build using this language. So, for example, there is a square table with 4 chairs, sofa in a room. Now imagine you need to say the same sentence without having those words, table, chairs, and sofa, right? Imagine how difficult would it be. Now, if we talk about cloud native, we don't fully agree on the terms. So we keep talking about the things like a table without actually properly defining them. So the idea of patterns is actually agree on common language first, so we can actually have a proper conversation. This is an example of a pattern. There are many different ways to define patterns, but you don't really need to read all of it. There is a name, there is context, like a company is moving to cloud native, and then there is a problem. If the domain of the, how it's specifically said, is a combination of limited experience and lack of extra time and flexibility for research leads to pursuing cloud-native transformation implementation using well-known ways, right? So if you don't have ways to innovate and you have no time to experiment, then you will do it in the way you already know, which is monolith and whatever else. So this is an example of a pattern. And then, yeah, so there is context, there is problem, there is solution, and the new context. In cloud native transformation pattern language, so we have about 70-something patterns right now. And I'm going to use not all of them, but a subset of those patterns to actually explain the solution. And the last tool is cognitive biases. Now, who have read this book? Not too many. You definitely should, right? It's a very good book. It's actually easy to read. It is about psychology and economics together. It's actually a very easy book to read. The general idea of this book, and this is based on the research that won Nobel Prize for economics. This is behavioral sciences, right? Behavioral economics. The general idea is that we have two systems in our mind. The first system is fast and intuitive. Those are heuristics. Those are the things we do without thinking. They are very quick. We hear something, we run, right? The other thing is more thinking, deliberate, but it's very slow and very expensive. It's very expensive in terms of brain power. So what happens is, first, we use, if the heuristic, the fast heuristic is available, we will just use that. If we cannot solve a problem using a fast heuristic, then we will bring our mind into the problem, and then we will have much better understanding of the situation. The problem is that there are predictable behaviors, predictable biases built in our brains, and they're consistent, and some of them are ostrich effect, for example. It's pretty clear, right? So we tend to stick our head in the sand when we have a difficult situation. Status quo bias, right? We all want to present the status quo. It's a natural thing for humans to preserve status quo. Availability heuristic. If something comes to your mind very quickly, it will affect your decision making, right? If, for example, you see in the TV all the time car accidents, you will feel that there are too many car accidents, like more car accidents than there were last year. If you spend an hour watching car accidents on TV, you will have a feeling that the world is going worse on car accidents. This is nothing to do with actual statistics, right? This is how our brain works. So if we can pull the information faster from the memory, we feel that it's happening more frequently. Okay, those are sort of a segue into a bit of a theoretical background. So let's review the current situation, what happened back to Wall Street, what happened with Jani. And what happened in the first attempt was that they tried to do cloud native sort of work as usual. So there was a creativity. So basically, there was very little creativity, very little freedom to explore and research, and everything was just proficiency. So they put the cloud-native tasks into normal backlog. It didn't work out very well for them. So the second one was, they said, okay, we will take maybe 50, maybe 70% of the team and put them on creative tasks. Basically creating new infrastructure. But they didn't really manage them in creative way. So like we saw, there is different ways to manage a team for creativity and for proficiency. So what they have done, they demanded creative work, but they still run it as proficient task. So let's try to see how it could be done better. And I'm going to use, again, those patterns. So each one of those cards is a pattern, right? It sort of tries to be self-explanatory. If you don't get the point, it doesn't really matter. I'll explain it in general terms. So when the cloud native transformation starts, and this is based on our own experience of doing it over and over again with many companies of different sizes, what we see as the most effective way to start the transformation is to actually have a transformation champion, somebody who would actually drive this whole thing, a person or small group of people who would actually bring the energy into making it happen. The next thing is the business case. This sounds so obvious that why would you start a massive, very expensive transformation without actually having a business case? And yet, the business case many times is because we read Gartner report, because our engineers are pushing to do containers, because, I don't know, it's not a justification for investment of millions of euros in very expensive, very complex project, unless you actually have a business value as outcome of that. And once you have that, you really need a very clear executive commitment. So the team that runs the company has to support this initiative. After that, what we tend to do is to set up a small core team, typically anywhere between 3 to 7 people, that will actually build the platform. And then we define the vision. What is actually the goal? How the platform will look like? How the organizational structure will look like? What is the order of execution? And then we go into more defining the actual execution strategy and the architecture and all more of technical details. After that, we separate the organization into 2 parts. One is more creative and innovative, this core team that is building the cloud native platform and building the practices how to migrate to that platform, and the rest of the organization. The rest of the organization, so first the new core team, or the platform team, I'll call it core team for now. So new core team runs series of experiments, does proofs of concepts, and eventually builds the MVP, the minimum viable product of a platform. Something that is reasonably production ready, but very short. It doesn't take 2 years. It typically takes anywhere between 4 to 6 months to build something reasonable. And it needs to be production ready. And of course, we are using distributed systems because that's what we do, right? It's cloud native conference. We all build distributed systems. So this is actually the cloud native setup itself, right? This is what you do to actually have an MVP, a proper functional cloud native platform. And then, in parallel, the rest of the team keeps delivering the value. So there is no platform yet. There is no cloud native platform. There are no cloud native any sort of processes. There is nothing in the company, right? So just keep doing the old thing because the customers still need their stuff, right? If you don't want the CEO to come and say, I will outsource the entire engineering team, then you have to deliver the value. You need to feed the beast, right? The company needs to make the money. And then once this coming close to actually completion, then we need to onboard the team slowly. And also many enterprises, they do everything sort of all or nothing. We will build the platform, it will take us a year, and then after that, we will onboard the entire 200 teams engineering department all in 1 week to the cloud native platform. This is not a very practical solution because the first platform will be unstable, not fully functional, and the moment you onboard too many teams to it, there will be too much support work, too much responding to failures, right? At that point, the team that is actually building the platform will not really be able to invest more into improvement. And we see a lot of companies just get stuck at this point. We have something, we onboard prematurely the rest of the teams, and then we just stuck in continuous fight with the production system that never really becomes good. And after that, so after the gradual onboarding, the rest of the teams, they can continuously cut the pieces of the old monolith and put them into microservices, and they do whatever they need to do. And maybe at the end, once everything is sort of, all the major pieces of the software already in microservices on the cloud, maybe then we can just lift and shift the remaining parts that will never change. On the other hand, we continue investing in the three horizons. We continue investing into innovation and new research. It never stops. Of course, each one of those patterns can be expanded into a bunch of different patterns. We can go deeper and deeper. I'm not going to talk about each one of them, but what is distributed system is possibly all of those and more. What is gradual onboarding? All these things need to happen. What is three horizons? Yeah, you can do all kind of A/B testing, invest in SRE, do all kind of different things that are future investment in the future of the company. And a very important part is cultural patterns. Because, as I said, cloud native is not purely technical transformation. Now, in many companies, when people try to define what culture is, they say, that's who we are. Now, when you say something like that, like, that's who we are, this is our DNA, you cannot change DNA. You cannot change who you are. It basically means that if you say it this way, you give up on changing, right? A much better approach is to say culture is a set of living relationships working towards a shared goal. It's not something you are, it's something you do. Essentially, a culture is a set of practices, set of things you do every day, routines, processes, how you talk to people, do you trust each other? This is your culture. And this can be changed. It can be changed by small investment in all kinds of practices. Things like blameless inquiry or honest feedback or all kinds of different things, right? Those are the small things that you can actually start setting up to continuously or slowly change the culture. So, if we go this way, then what happens after the second attempt? What we can do is actually balance much better between creativity and proficiency. So when we said we will actually go into setting up a separate team and we will manage them differently, then we go we invest some effort into creativity, but still majority of the company is going and doing the same thing they were doing before. The important thing with this is that you can always play with creativity and proficiency. It's okay, maybe at some point you only need 25% proficiency, creativity, but maybe at some point you want to build a new product and you want to get half of your team and put them to develop new product. This is fine. You can always balance it in the way that is appropriate for your actual business. So it means that what you actually need is not just the features that you need to deliver to your customers, not just the value that immediately can be sold to the customers, but also things that will help you later on, maybe a year from now, to actually deal with those cloud-native competitors. And also you need to start researching the things that maybe you will never really need, but who knows? But at least when they come, you are ready. Now, said all that, yeah, and this slide called Cloud Native Innovation, right? So you may think that this is all about Cloud Native, right? But in reality, it is just about innovation in general. Yes, we had one transformation. The transformation was towards Cloud Native. But if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you actually remain innovative, regardless if it's Cloud Native or any other discipline. we're using here cloud native tools to just emphasize that it is about cloud native innovation. But what if you start putting your own features here, right? If you want to innovate within your own products, you can use the same methodology. And if you want it or not, they are coming, right? Starling is not going to end. There is a bunch of new companies, Amazon, ING, all of them, they are still coming. You cannot change that. The only question is, do you want to be ready for that? Or you hope it will be fine and they will never come to your niche? This is the story from this book, which is more or less finished, almost finished, and will be available in a couple of months from now. But yeah, so this book is basically exactly this, just more, just much bigger story. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question about, like, when you start this digital transformation in your kind of old big company, would you kind of hire consultants, or you find somebody inside who can do this?
So I'm a consultant, right? You hire me, yeah? It always works in combination. It's the thing is that consultants cannot help you. They can help you to change, but there are a few elements. First, if you hire technical consultants that only help you to implement Kubernetes, this will not change the story, right? They're consultants. They are same as everyone else. But the biggest problem is how ready are you to change, right? If the consultants will come and only do the technology, if the consultants will come and help you to actually take all those steps and improve and learn how to do it next time, then they're good consultants, right? If you read proper consulting books, then it's always about helping the customers rather than charging for projects. So if you find the right consultant, probably will help you.